I was standing in my driveway staring at an empty space when I realized my father had lost his mind. The truck wasn't there. My truck. The one I'd saved for. The one I'd bought with my own money 3 years ago. Just gone. I called him. Asked where it was. He said he sold it. Said he needed the money. I asked what for. He hesitated. Then said it was none of my business. That's when I knew. My father, 68 years old, retired postal worker, widower for 5 years, had sent money to someone he'd never met, and when he ran out of his own money, he'd taken mine. Before we dive in, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 100 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these tales matter. Please subscribe to Deception Stories, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. This is Gregor's story. My name is Declan. I'm 32, work as an electrician. Commercial buildings mostly. Good money, steady work. Live about 20 minutes from my father, Gregor. Close enough to check on him regularly. Far enough that he has his independence. My mother, Isadora, died 5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. Didn't even get to say proper goodbyes. One day she was complaining about back pain. 3 weeks later she was in hospice. 2 weeks after that, she was gone. My father took it hard. Harder than I expected. They'd been married 41 years. High school sweethearts. He didn't know how to exist without her. Didn't know how to cook for himself. Didn't know how to do laundry the way he liked it. Didn't know how to fill the silence. After she died, he retired early from the postal service. 53 years of delivering mail. Got a small pension and Social Security, enough to live on if he was careful. He stopped doing the things he used to do. His woodworking group met every Tuesday. He stopped going. His poker night with the guys from the post office. Stopped going. The Sunday dinners at my aunt's house. He'd cancel last minute. Say he was tired. Say he wasn't feeling up to it. He just stayed home. Watched television. Sat in his chair. Stared at nothing. I visited twice a week. Brought groceries. Fixed things around the house that were breaking down. Tried to get him out. Lunch. Coffee. A drive. Anything. He'd say yes to make me stop asking. Then call an hour before and cancel. He wasn't depressed exactly. Or maybe he was, and I didn't want to see it. He functioned. Paid his bills on time. Kept the house relatively clean. Answered when I called. But there was no life in him. Just going through motions. Eating because he had to. Sleeping because there was nothing else to do. I worried. But I didn't know how to help. Grief counseling, I suggested once. He said no. Said that talking to strangers wouldn't bring her back. I didn't push. Figured time would help. That eventually he'd find his way through it. Then around March, about 4.5 years after my mother died, something changed. Small things at first. He started calling me instead of waiting for me to call him. Asked about my week, about work, about whether I was seeing anyone, made jokes, bad ones. Dad jokes, but jokes. First time I'd heard him laugh since the funeral. I asked what was going on, what had changed. He said nothing. Just feeling a little better. Said maybe the worst of the grief was passing. I didn't push. Was just grateful to hear something other than emptiness in his voice. In early April, during one of my visits, he mentioned he'd been talking to someone online. A woman. I was fixing his leaky faucet. He said it casually. Like it was nothing. I asked where he met her. He said Facebook. One of those grief support groups. For widows and widowers. Said they'd connected over similar experiences. Both lost their spouses. Both struggling with loneliness. Both trying to figure out how to move forward. Her name was Katarina. From Czech Republic. He showed me her profile picture. Attractive woman. Maybe late 50s. Blonde. Smiling. Professional-looking photo. I felt something twist in my stomach, but I didn't say anything. He was an adult. If talking to someone online helped him feel less alone, who was I to judge? Over the next few weeks, he mentioned her more. Katarina said this. Katarina thinks that. Katarina recommended this show, this book, this restaurant. She was becoming a fixture in his vocabulary, a presence in his life. I was glad he had someone to talk to, but also uneasy. Something felt off. Couldn't articulate what. One Sunday in late April, I asked if they'd video chatted. He said no. Said her internet wasn't good enough for video. Just messages mostly. Some voice calls. I asked if that seemed strange. He got defensive. Said not everyone had high-speed internet, that she lived in a rural area, that it wasn't unusual. I dropped it. But the unease grew. In early May, he asked me a question that made my stomach drop. Asked if I knew how to send money internationally, Western Union or something similar. I asked why. He said Katerina needed help with something, some kind of emergency. He didn't elaborate. I asked what kind of emergency. He said it was personal, that she'd tell him when she was comfortable, that she'd pay him back. I asked how much. He said just a few hundred. Nothing major. I sat him down. Told him to be careful, that there were scams targeting lonely people online, especially older people, especially people grieving. He got angry, said he wasn't stupid, that he knew what scams looked like, that Katerina wasn't like that I didn't understand their connection. I said I was just worried. He said he appreciated my concern, but didn't need it. That he was capable of making his own decisions. I left, but couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was starting. The next week, I came by unannounced. Brought lunch. He seemed distracted. Kept checking his phone, smiling at messages. When I asked what was so interesting, he said nothing. Just emails. But I'd seen the contact name when a notification popped up. My love, with a heart emoji. After lunch, I tried again. Asked him directly if he'd sent Katerina money. He said yes. $300. Said her car broke down and she needed it for repairs. That she'd pay him back when her late husband's estate was settled. I asked how long the estate had been in probate. He didn't know. Said these things took time in Europe. I asked if he'd at least video chatted with her before sending money. He said no. That they'd tried, but her camera wasn't working. That she'd ordered a new webcam, but it hadn't arrived yet. I asked if that didn't seem convenient. He told me I was being paranoid. That not everything was a scam. That sometimes people just needed help, and you either helped them or you didn't. I left feeling worse than when I'd arrived. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried a different approach. Sent him articles about romance scams, stories about people who'd lost their savings, warning signs to watch for. He didn't respond to any of them. Called my Aunt Petra, my father's older sister, told her what was happening. She said she'd noticed he'd been distant lately, that he'd stopped coming to Sunday dinners, that when she called, he was always busy, always had somewhere to be. She said she'd try talking to him. She called me back 2 days later, said it hadn't gone well, said he'd gotten defensive, told her it was his life and his money, that everyone needed to stop treating him like a child, then hung up on her. In mid-May, I showed up at his house. His car was gone. I waited. He came home 2 hours later. I asked where he'd been. He said the bank. I asked why. He said it was personal. We stood in his driveway, sun setting, neither of us saying what we were both thinking. Finally, I asked him how much he'd sent her. He said it wasn't my business. I said it became my business when he started withdrawing large amounts from his account, when he started acting secretive, when he started pushing everyone away. He asked how I knew about his account. I said I didn't. Was just guessing. But his face told me I was right. He said he'd sent 2,000. That Katerina's son was sick. That she needed money for medical bills. That healthcare in Czech Republic was complicated for people without proper insurance. That she'd pay him back. I asked if he'd talked to her son, heard his voice, confirmed any of this. He said no. That the son was too sick to talk. That Katerina was handling everything. I asked if he realized how this sounded. He said he knew how it sounded. But that I didn't know Katerina, didn't understand their connection, that she was real, that she cared about him, that for the first time in 5 years he felt like someone saw him as more than just a grieving widower. I didn't know what to say to that. How do you argue with someone's need to feel seen? I left, drove home, sat in my apartment, wondered if maybe I was wrong, if maybe my father had actually found something real, If maybe I was being cynical. If maybe loneliness made you take risks that looked stupid from the outside but made sense when you were drowning in silence. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe my father wasn't being scammed. That Katarina was real. That he'd be okay. But I didn't believe it. Not really. In early June, I noticed his house was deteriorating. Gutter hanging loose. Porch light broken. Weeds taking over the garden my mother had loved. The mailbox tilting to one side. These were things he'd normally handle himself. He was handy. Took pride in maintaining his house. But now it was like he didn't see any of it. Or didn't care. I asked if he was okay financially. If he needed help with anything. He said he was fine. Just busy. Busy with what? I asked. He didn't answer. Just changed the subject. Asked about my work. About my girlfriend who wasn't actually my girlfriend. Small talk to avoid real talk. I started coming by unannounced more often. Always caught him on his phone. Typing rapidly. Smiling. When I'd walk in, he'd lock the screen quickly. Guilty look on his face. One afternoon in mid-June, I was fixing his kitchen sink. The disposal had stopped working. His phone was on the counter next to me. A message came through. The preview lit up the screen. Can you confirm the Western Union transaction? MTCN 18475-034. Thank you, my darling. I love you so much. I stared at it. Felt sick. Western Union. Transaction numbers. This wasn't a relationship. This was a business. After I finished the sink, I confronted him. Showed him the message preview. Asked him how much money he'd sent in total. He got angry. Said I had no right to look at his phone. I said I didn't look at it. That the message just appeared. That I couldn't help seeing it. He said it was none of my business. That his money was his to do with as he pleased. I asked how much. He wouldn't say. I asked if he'd video chatted with her yet. He said her camera still wasn't working. That the new one got lost in shipping. That she'd ordered another. I asked if that didn't seem suspicious. That after 2 months of talking, after sending thousands of dollars, they still hadn't seen each other on video. He said I didn't understand. That technology was complicated. That not everyone could afford good equipment. That she was doing her best. I said scammers don't video chat because they're not who they say they are. That the photos are stolen. That the person behind the account is probably not even a woman. Probably not even in Czech Republic. He told me to leave. Said I was ruining his happiness. That I couldn't stand to see him move on. That I wanted him to be miserable forever because I was miserable. I left. Didn't talk to him for a week. Longest we'd gone without contact since my mother died. Then I got a call from Mrs. Chen, his next-door neighbor. Elderly Korean woman who'd lived there for 30 years. She'd watched me grow up. Said she was worried about my father. Said she'd seen him leave at odd hours. Early morning, late night. Always in a hurry. Always on his phone. Said his mail was piling up. That his yard looked terrible. That she'd tried talking to him but he barely acknowledged her anymore. I thanked her. Told her I'd check on him. I drove over that evening. Let myself in with the key he'd given me years ago. The house was a mess. Not dirty exactly. Just neglected. Dishes piled up. Mail stacked on the counter. Unopened. Magazines still in plastic. Bills probably overdue. I waited. He came home after dark. Looked surprised to see me. I asked where he'd been. He said out. I asked where. He said it didn't matter. We fought. Really fought. Raised voices. Said things we didn't mean. Or maybe things we did mean but hadn't wanted to say. I told him he was being scammed. That Katarina wasn't real. That whoever was behind that account was taking advantage of his loneliness, his grief, his desperate need for connection. He said I was jealous. That I couldn't handle him being happy. That I wanted him to stay stuck in grief because it made me feel needed. Made me feel important. I said that wasn't true. That I wanted him to be happy, but that this wasn't happiness. This was delusion. This was throwing his life away for someone who didn't exist. He told me to get out, said I wasn't welcome anymore, that until I could be supportive, I should stay away. I left. Sat in my truck in his driveway for 20 minutes, hands shaking. Felt like I was losing him. Like the father I'd known was disappearing, being replaced by someone desperate and defensive and unreachable. I didn't talk to him for 2 weeks. He didn't call, didn't text, nothing. My aunt tried reaching out, said he wasn't returning her calls either, that the whole family was worried, that maybe we should stage an intervention, get everyone together and confront him. I said that would push him further away, that confronting them never worked, that they had to realize it themselves. I'd been reading about this, about how to handle someone being scammed. All the experts said the same thing. Don't attack. Don't accuse. Stay connected. Be patient. But patience was hard when you were watching someone destroy themselves. In late July, I broke down and called him, asked if we could talk. He said sure, sounded tired. I went over. We sat on his porch, didn't go inside, like I wasn't allowed anymore. I apologized for yelling, for being judgmental. Said I was just worried about him. He said he knew, said he appreciated my concern, but he was fine. I asked how Katarina was. He brightened, said she was good, that they were making plans, that she was going to visit in October, that she'd booked the ticket, that they'd finally meet in person. I felt a small spark of hope. Maybe if she actually showed up, even if the relationship was real, that would be something. Better than endless messages and wire transfers. I asked if he was excited. He said terrified. Said he'd been talking to her for months, but what if they didn't connect in person? What if the chemistry wasn't there? What if he'd built it up in his head and reality disappointed? For a moment, he sounded like my father again. Vulnerable, honest, human. I said if it was real, it would work out. He nodded. Said he hoped so. I left feeling slightly better. Like maybe there was a chance this could resolve without disaster. Maybe she was real. Maybe this could work out. Maybe I'd been wrong. I wanted to be wrong. Desperately wanted to be wrong. But I wasn't wrong. In early August, he called me, voice shaking. Said Katarina needed more money. That there was a problem with her ticket. Something about visa requirements, about needing additional documentation, about having to pay expediting fees. I asked how much. He said $3,500. I asked if that seemed reasonable. He said he didn't know, that he didn't understand international travel requirements, that she'd sent him screenshots of the paperwork, that it looked official. I asked him to send me the screenshots. He did. I looked at them. Clearly fake. Bad Photoshop. Wrong fonts. Spelling errors. The logos didn't match actual Czech government websites. I told him they were fake. He said I was being paranoid, that I was looking for problems where none existed. I asked if he had $3,500. He said he'd figure it out. I asked what that meant. He didn't answer. 2 days later, my aunt called me, said she'd driven by his house. Saw a moving truck in the driveway, watched them load furniture. I asked what kind of furniture. She said a couch, an armchair, the dining room table my mother had inherited from her mother, family pieces, things that mattered. I drove over immediately, got there as they were pulling away, went inside. The living room was half empty, furniture gone, pictures still on the walls but nothing to sit on. My father was in the kitchen, counting cash, looked up when I walked in, guilty expression. I asked what he was doing. He said selling some furniture he didn't need, that the house was too full, that he was simplifying. I asked how much he got. He said $4,000. I asked where it was going. He didn't answer. I knew where it was going. I begged him not to send it. Told him Katarina wasn't coming, that this was how the scam worked. Endless delays, endless emergencies, endless requests for money. He said I was wrong, that she was coming, that he just had to help her through this one last obstacle. There's always one more obstacle, I said. Always one more emergency, one more delay. That's the pattern. That's how they keep you hooked. He said I didn't understand, that I'd never lost someone the way he'd lost my mother, that I didn't know what it was like to be alone at 68 with nothing to look forward to except slow decline and death. That hurt, because he was right. I didn't understand, not fully, but I understood enough to know this was destroying him. I left. Couldn't watch him send $4,000 to a stranger. Couldn't be complicit in his destruction. Over the next month, things got worse. August bled into September. He stopped answering calls. Stopped responding to texts. When I'd show up unannounced, he'd barely crack the door. Say he was busy, that he'd call me later. He never did. Mrs. Chen called twice more, said his utilities had been shut off briefly, that she'd seen the trucks, said the mail carrier had mentioned the mailbox was overflowing, that he'd stopped collecting it. My aunt went by. He wouldn't let her in. Said through the door that he was fine, that everyone needed to stop checking on him, that he was an adult. In late September, I showed up early morning, 6 a.m., before he could be prepared, before he could hide evidence of whatever he was doing. His car wasn't there. I waited. 2 hours later, he pulled in. Looked exhausted. I asked where he'd been. He said errands. I asked what kind. He said none of my business. I pushed past him into the house. More furniture was gone. My mother's china cabinet, the bookshelf from his office, the antique mirror in the hallway. All gone. I asked how much debt he was in. He said he wasn't in debt. I said that was a lie, that you don't sell your dead wife's china cabinet unless you're desperate. He said I needed to leave. I said not until he told me the truth. How much have you sent her? How much? He wouldn't answer, just stood there, silent, defeated. I looked in his refrigerator, nearly empty, checked the cabinets. Same. Asked when he'd last gone grocery shopping. He said he wasn't hungry much lately. I asked if he was eating, really eating, or just surviving on whatever was easy. He told me to stop mothering him. I wasn't mothering him. I was watching him starve himself to send money to a ghost. I left, stopped at the grocery store. Bought a week's worth of food, brought it back. He wouldn't let me in, said I couldn't just show up and try to fix his life, that he didn't need saving. I left the groceries on the porch, drove away, watched in the rearview mirror as he opened the door and slowly brought them inside. In early October, Katerina was supposed to arrive. My father had told me the date. October 7th, evening flight, arriving at the airport at 7 p.m. I didn't believe she'd show. But part of me hoped I was wrong. That maybe, somehow, she was real. That maybe this would all work out and I'd have to eat my words and apologize for being paranoid. October 7th came. My father didn't call. I didn't reach out. Gave him space. Waited. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. His number. I answered immediately. His voice was hollow. Said the flight was delayed. That there was weather. That she'd get on the next one. I didn't say anything. Just listened. At midnight, he called again. Said the flight was canceled. That she'd have to rebook. That she'd come tomorrow. I asked if he was okay. He said he was fine. Just disappointed. Hung up before I could respond. The next day, same pattern. Flight delayed. Then rescheduled. Then she missed it because of traffic. Then because her documentation wasn't right. Then because there was some issue at the airport. Each time, a new excuse. Each time, another reason she couldn't come. Each time, another request for money to fix the new problem. I drove to his house that evening. He was sitting on his porch, staring at nothing, phone in his hand. I sat next to him, didn't say anything for a while, then asked if she was coming. He said yes, just not today. Soon though, very soon. I asked how much he'd sent to fix the latest problem. He said $1,500 for new documentation, for expediting fees, for administrative costs. I asked where he got $1,500. He didn't answer. I went inside. His truck was gone. The old Ford he'd had for 12 years. His pride. Gone. I asked where it was. He said he sold it. Said he didn't need it anymore. That one vehicle was enough. I asked how much he got. He said $3,000. I asked where the other $1,500 went. He said bills, groceries, life. But I knew that was a lie. It went to Katerina. All of it. Always Katerina. October ended. November came. She still hadn't arrived. More delays, more emergencies, More requests. I stopped asking how much. Stopped trying to talk sense. Just checked on him. Made sure he was alive. Made sure he had food. Paid his utility bills directly so they wouldn't get shut off again. In mid-November, I noticed something was missing. My mother's jewelry, her wedding ring, her grandmother's necklace, family heirlooms, things that were supposed to come to me eventually. I asked where they were. He said he'd put them somewhere safe. I knew he was lying. I asked if he'd sold them. He didn't deny it. Said he needed the money, that it was just sitting in a drawer, that she would have wanted him to use it if it helped him. That broke something in me. Using my mother's memory to justify this, to excuse throwing away her jewelry to send money to a stranger. I yelled, really yelled, said things I shouldn't have, about how Mom would be ashamed, about how he was dishonoring her memory, about how she'd worked her whole life and he was pissing it away on a fantasy. He didn't yell back, just stood there, taking it. When I finished, he said quietly that I should go. I left. Didn't talk to him for 3 weeks. Thanksgiving came and went. He didn't show up to my aunt's. No one was surprised. In early December, something changed. He called me, 3 a.m. I answered thinking something was wrong, thinking maybe he'd hurt himself. His voice was shaking. Said he needed to see me, that it was important. I drove over immediately, half expecting to find him in crisis. Instead, found him sitting at his kitchen table, phone in front of him, face pale, hands trembling. I asked what happened. He didn't speak for a long moment, then said he'd asked Katarina for $20,000. I thought I'd misheard. Asked him to repeat. He said she'd asked him for $20,000, said her son needed surgery, emergency surgery, that without it, he'd die, that they didn't have insurance, that the hospital required payment up front, that if he really loved her, if he really cared, he'd find a way. I asked what he said. He said he told her he didn't have $20,000, that he'd sent everything he had, that he'd sold everything he could sell, that there was nothing left. He said he'd expected understanding, sympathy, something. Instead, she'd gone silent. No response for 6 hours. Then finally, a message. If you loved me truly, you would find the money. $20,000 is not so much for someone's life, but I see now you do not love me like you say. You only want to use me. I am disappointed. I can't get that much. I've sent over $70,000 already. I have nothing left. Can't you understand? Then you are useless to me. Do not contact again. Read 11:47 p.m. Blocked. He showed me the messages. His hands shook, holding the phone. I read them twice. Felt rage building. But also something else. Relief. Finally he was seeing it. I asked if he'd tried calling. He said yes. Number disconnected. Tried messaging on a different platform. Account deleted. Tried video calling. Suddenly her camera worked fine, but no one answered. For 8 months, her camera was broken. Webcam lost in mail. New one on back order. But now that he couldn't send money, suddenly the camera worked. Suddenly she could video chat, but wouldn't. He'd looked at her profile again. Really looked this time. Noticed things he'd been too desperate to see before. The photos were generic. Professional looking, but impersonal. Could be anyone. Probably were anyone. Her friends list was small. About 60 people. All profiles that looked similar to hers. Generic photos. Minimal posts. Probably all fake. All part of the operation. Her posts were vague. Having a wonderful day. Feeling blessed. Grateful for good friends. Nothing specific. Nothing that tied her to a real location. A real life. He'd started clicking through. Noticed her photos appeared on other profiles. Different names. Different stories. Same face. Then he did what he should have done 8 months ago. Reverse image search. Took her profile picture. Dropped it into Google. Found it on 15 different websites. Stock photo sites. Dating profiles. Instagram accounts. All different names. All different locations. Some said she was Russian, some Ukrainian, some American, One said she was a nurse in Ohio. Same photos, different lies. He'd been talking to no one, or everyone. Probably a team of people. Maybe not even in Czech Republic. Maybe Nigeria, maybe Philippines, maybe anywhere. Could be men, could be women, could be anyone with a script and a quota. And he'd sent them $73,000. He looked at me, tears running down his face, asked if I hated him, if I'd ever forgive him. I didn't know what to say. I was angry. So angry. About the truck. About the lies. About being pushed away. About watching him destroy himself. But he was my father, and he was broken. I said I didn't hate him. That I was angry. That I'd be angry for a long time. But I didn't hate him. He said he'd been stupid. That he'd fallen for the oldest trick in the world. That he'd destroyed everything for someone who never existed. I said we'd figure it out. That we'd deal with it. That he wasn't alone. He said he'd pay me back for the truck. I asked with what? He had nothing left. We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked what he wanted to do. He said he didn't know. That he was too ashamed to face anyone. Too embarrassed to admit what he'd done. I said everyone already knew. That the family had been worried for months. That hiding wouldn't make it better. He asked what I thought he should do. I said report it. To the police, to the FBI, to anyone who might listen. He said what was the point? The money was gone. Overseas. Untraceable. I said reporting it created a record. Helped track patterns. Maybe prevented the next person from falling for it. Maybe helped investigators build a case. He nodded. Said he'd do it. Tomorrow. When he had the strength. I stayed that night. Slept on his couch. Didn't want to leave him alone. Didn't trust what he might do if left with his thoughts. The next morning, we went to the police station together, filed a report, gave them everything. Transaction records, screenshots, messages, all of it. The officer who took the report was kind, said she'd seen this before. 3 times that month alone. Different victims, same pattern. Said recovery was unlikely, but they'd send it to the FBI. That these operations were international. That they moved money through multiple countries. That by the time anyone traced it, it was gone. She gave us a case number, contact information for victim support services. A pamphlet about romance scams that my father folded and put in his pocket without reading. We filed an FBI report online that afternoon. Same information, same documents, same hopelessness. Then we started dealing with the practical reality. He was $73,000 in debt, had taken out a home equity loan, maxed out 3 credit cards, borrowed from his retirement account. His credit score was destroyed. His house was at risk. His retirement was gone. I called a bankruptcy lawyer, set up a consultation. They said Chapter 7 was probably his best option. Wipe out most of the unsecured debt. Might lose the house, though. Depended on the equity. We spent 2 weeks going through his finances. Every transaction, every loan, every credit card, building a complete picture of the damage. $73,000 in total. Sent over 8 months, small amounts at first, few hundred, then bigger, few thousand, then huge, 10,000, 15,000, 20 at once. I asked if he remembered what each one was for. He showed me notes he'd kept. Medical bills, visa fees, flight costs, emergency repairs, hospital bills, legal fees, documentation fees, translation fees, transportation costs, immigration lawyer, emergency loans for her, money for her son, money for her mother, money for problems that never existed. Every single one with a story, a crisis, an emergency, a reason why this was the last time, why after this she'd come. They'd be together. Everything would be fine. Looking at it all together, it was obvious. Painfully obvious. But when you're in it, when you're desperate, you see each request as separate, as an isolated incident, as one more thing to overcome. You don't see the pattern until you step back, until you're forced to look at it all at once. We filed bankruptcy in January. He lost the house, couldn't afford the home equity loan payments, Couldn't afford to keep it even without the loan. The upkeep was too much. We had an estate sale, sold what little was left. Furniture, tools, books. My mother's things that hadn't already been sold to fund the scam. I helped him pack. We filled boxes in silence, room by room. 43 years in that house, my childhood home. Gone. He moved in with me in February. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. Small, but enough. He took the 2nd bedroom, set up a twin bed, a dresser, a TV. That was it. Everything he owned fit in one room. At 68, my father was starting over. Had nothing. Was worse off than when he'd started working at 18. The shame was crushing him. Wouldn't leave the apartment for the first month. Wouldn't talk to family. Wouldn't answer calls. I made him see a therapist. Found one who specialized in fraud victims. He went once. Said it didn't help. I made him go again. And again. Eventually, he kept going on his own. The therapist connected him with a support group. Other people who'd been scammed. Other seniors who'd lost everything to romance scams, investment scams, lottery scams. All different. All the same. He started going weekly. Said it helped to talk to people who understood, who didn't judge, who'd made the same mistakes, who carried the same shame. One of the other members convinced him to volunteer. Local senior center ran workshops on online safety. Needed people to share their stories, warn others, show them the red flags. He was terrified at first. Said he couldn't stand up and admit what he'd done. Couldn't face the judgment. But he did it. Told his story. Showed the messages. Explained how it worked. How they built trust. How they manipulated. How they isolated you from people who could see the truth. Some people listened. Some didn't. One woman told him after that she'd been talking to someone online. That the person was asking for money. That hearing his story made her realize what was happening. That she'd blocked them. Reported them. Saved herself. He said that made it worth it. Made the shame slightly more bearable. Turned his mistake into something useful. He's been living with me for 8 months now. We've found a rhythm. He cooks dinner most nights. Does the grocery shopping. Keeps the apartment clean. Tries to contribute even though he has no income beyond Social Security. We don't talk about Katarina much. Don't talk about the money. Don't talk about what was lost, unless he brings it up. Sometimes he does. Late at night. Can't sleep. Comes out to the living room where I'm watching TV. Sits down. Stares at nothing for a while. Then asks questions. How did I not see it? How did I fall for something so obvious? How did I let it go so far? I don't have good answers. Just tell him what the therapist told him. That scammers are professionals. That they study psychology. That they test tactics until they find what works. That loneliness makes you vulnerable in ways you can't predict until you're in it. He nods. Says he knows that intellectually, but it doesn't make him feel less stupid. Last week, he said something that's been sitting with me. Said the worst part wasn't losing the money. Wasn't even losing the house. Was losing those 8 months. The time he spent isolated. Pushing away real people for someone fake. The memories he could have been making with family. The healing he could have been doing. The life he could have been living. Instead, he was sitting in an empty house typing messages to no one. Sending money into a void. Calling it love. He said he'd traded 8 months of actual life for a fantasy. That he'd chosen digital connection over human presence. That he'd believed pixels on a screen over the people standing in front of him trying to help. And that's what haunts him. Not the money. The time. You can't get time back. I asked him why he fell for it. What made Katarina different? What made him believe when everything pointed to it being fake? He thought about it for a long time. Then said she told him things he needed to hear. That he mattered. That someone was thinking about him. That he wasn't just a lonely old man waiting to die. That there was still love ahead. Still possibility. Still a future worth looking forward to. The scam worked because he was vulnerable. Because grief had hollowed him out. Because loneliness is a physical thing. An ache. A presence. And someone offered to fill it. For a price. He paid that price. We all did. I asked if he'd ever try dating again. Real dating. He laughed, said no, said he didn't trust himself anymore, didn't trust his judgment, didn't want to risk being fooled again. I said that meant they'd won, that they'd taken not just his money but his ability to connect, his willingness to be vulnerable, his hope. He said maybe, but that hope had cost him everything. Better to live without it than risk that again. I don't agree, but I understand. About a month ago, I found the truck, wasn't looking for it, was scrolling through Craigslist, saw a listing. Blue Ford F-150, 2019. Same make, same model. Clicked on it. Same scratch on the driver's side door from where I'd scraped a pole. Same dent in the tailgate from helping a friend move a dryer. It was mine. My truck. Someone had bought it from whoever my father sold it to. Was selling it for $6,000. I'd paid $12,000. My father got $8,000. Now it was $6,000. I called the number. Guy said he'd bought it from a dealer auction. Had owned it 3 months. Good truck. Clean title. Just needed the money. I bought it. Went the next day with cash. Drove it home. Parked it in my spot. Told my father that night. He asked where I got the money. I said I'd been saving. He said he'd pay me back. I said don't worry about it. He went outside. Stood in the parking lot looking at it. Ran his hand along the hood. Sat in the driver's seat. Just sat there. When he came back up, his eyes were red. Said he was sorry. That he knew sorry didn't fix anything. But he was sorry. I said I knew. The truck sits in my parking space now. I look at it every morning. Think about what it represents. What we lost. What we got back. What we can't ever get back. It's just a truck. Metal and glass and rubber. But it's also evidence. Proof of what happened. Of how far things went. Of how a lonely man's desperate need for connection cost him everything. And it's a reminder that some things can be recovered. Not everything. Not the money, not the time, not the trust, but some things. We're rebuilding, my father and me. It's slow, it's painful, but we're doing it. He works on repairing what he can, not the finances. Those are destroyed, but the relationships. Called my aunt last month, apologized, explained, asked if they could try again. She said yes. Went to Sunday dinner for the first time in over a year. Family was awkward at first. No one knew what to say. Then my cousin's kid asked him about woodworking. He used to make toys for them. The kid wanted to know if he'd teach him. My father said he sold all his tools. The kid said that was okay. Said Grandpa had tools. Could they use his? So now my father goes to Sunday dinner, stays after, goes to my uncle's garage, teaches my cousin's kid how to use a lathe, how to sand, how to finish. Small steps back to being human. He'll never get back what he lost. $73,000. His retirement, his house, his savings, my mother's jewelry, my truck money, years of security, gone. But he's still here, still breathing, still trying, still finding small ways to contribute, to matter, to rebuild some version of a life. And I'm here. We're here together. It's not the relationship we had before. Too much was broken. Too much trust was violated. But it's something. We're building something new from the wreckage. Last night we were watching TV. Commercial came on. Some dating app. Promises of finding love, connection, someone who understands you. My father grabbed the remote, changed the channel, said he was done with that. Done believing screens. Done trusting profiles. Done thinking you could find real connection through pixels. I said that's not fair, that real people do meet online. That technology isn't the problem. The people who exploit it are the problem. He said maybe, but he was done. Said if he couldn't find connection in real life, with real people, in real space, then he'd just be alone. That alone was better than scammed. I didn't argue. Maybe he's right. For him. For now. We sat in silence for a while. Then he asked if I wanted ice cream. Said he'd gone grocery shopping. Got the kind I liked. I said sure. He came back with 2 bowls. We ate ice cream and watched some cooking show neither of us cared about. Small moment, ordinary, quiet, but real. Actually real. Two people in the same space, eating ice cream, existing together. That's what my father paid $73,000 to learn. That this small, ordinary, real moment is worth more than any digital promise, any profile, any message, any fantasy. Connection is sitting next to someone eating ice cream, not typing to a stranger who will never come. He knows that now. Paid everything to learn it. But he knows. Stories like this happen every day. Different platforms, different stories, same ending. Someone lonely, someone vulnerable, someone desperate for connection, and someone willing to exploit that for money. If you're watching this because it's happening to someone you love, I don't have easy answers. I tried everything. Confrontation didn't work. Articles didn't work. Begging didn't work. They have to see it themselves. And sometimes they see it too late. But stay in their life. Don't abandon them even when they're making terrible choices. When they finally see the truth, they'll need you. The shame will be crushing. Don't add to it. Just be there. And if you're the one being targeted, if someone online is telling you everything you want to hear but always needs money, please stop. Please talk to someone you trust. Please reverse image search their photos. Please ask for a video call in real time. Please protect yourself before the damage is done. Because recovering from this isn't just about money. It's about rebuilding your ability to trust, your sense of judgment, your relationship with people who actually care about you. My father is doing that work now, at 68, starting over. It's hard, but he's doing it. Real love doesn't ask for Western Union. Real relationships don't require wire transfers. Real people will video chat, will meet in person, will be patient, will be present. If someone is pressuring you, making excuses, always having emergencies that need cash, that's not love. That's business, and you're the product. If you've been through something similar, if you've watched a parent or loved one fall for a romance scam, if you're going through this right now, if you're the person who was scammed, please know you're not alone. Leave a comment below if you feel comfortable sharing your story, or send it privately to the email in the description. Your story might help someone else, might make them realize what's happening, might save a family from going through what mine did. And if you're a parent watching this, if you have aging relatives who are alone, check on them. Not just phone calls, real visits, real presence, real connection. Because loneliness is what makes these scams work. Isolation is the vulnerability they exploit. Connection is the prevention. Real, human, in-person connection. Don't let someone you love become so isolated that a stranger's messages feel more real than your presence. Be what my father needed me to be. Be what I tried to be but couldn't be enough. Be present. Be persistent. Be patient. And maybe, just maybe, you can prevent someone from losing everything to a person who doesn't exist. Take care of each other.